Hey, folks, my name is Eddie Buchanan. I'm the host of the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk on fireengineering.com and FDIC. We're here at the show, live from FDIC. First off, this studio show is brought to you by Firehouse Subs and Firehouse Public Safety Foundation. You can enjoy more subs and save more lives. I know I've certainly done that myself with the Firehouse Subs where I live. You can find out more information about the restaurant ownership for firefighters at firehousesubfranchising.com. So be sure to go check that out. It's a pretty cool opportunity they have for firefighters, brothers and sisters around the country to do some cool work. So the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk, we typically talk about things that are related to fire service data, optimizing performance in the fire service. We look at technology. We look at a lot of different things. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today, particularly being at FDIC with the folks that are here, is looking downrange. How can firefighters come to a conference like this, and what classes should they be looking to take? What things could they do to gain a competitive edge in promotional processes and that type of thing? So I was looking around to see who I could find, who were the smartest people I could come up with that that would be able to help us have a conversation like that. So we've assembled a great team today to talk about that. About data in the fire service, and I'll start. Let me go ahead and everybody introduce yourself. And Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, where you're from?
Thanks, Chief. I'm the director of fire and EMS for Esri, the largest geospatial software company in the world, but a retired deputy chief from Henrico County, Virginia, metro-sized department in Central Virginia, in the Richmond, Virginia area. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Full disclosure, we grew up together, so we can tell a lot of stories offline, but we'll do that later.
Yeah.
Chief. Hi, Trevor Wilson from Indianapolis. I'm the planning chief, division chief of planning for the Indianapolis Fire Department. Did a lot of work with the Center for Public Safety Excellence, both as a contractor for their technical advisor program and then also as a peer team leader. So really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak today.
I'm glad you have the home team. You got the home team planning chief here. That's fantastic. Thank you for coming. Chief Urban.
Hey, Eddie, thank you. Yeah, Kenny Urban, been in fire service for almost 26 years. Grew up Corpus Christi, Texas, is their assistant chief of operations. Grew up with fire department, dual role provider, all ALS systems. So early on, firefighter and paramedic, had a lot of fun. Was able to go through our hazmat program and did a lot of work with hazmat response. We're an industrial city. It's an important skill to have there. An unfortunate move over to the rescue side of the house. I did some technical rescue, run 9 years task force 1. And promoted to the rank battalion chief. Now I'm assistant chief of operations. Do a lot of work with the state and work with the emergency medical task force, and doing work with that. And it's been exciting, kind of reaching out, seeing what everybody's doing, and data's a big part of that. Right? So it's great.
They say data is the new oil, right, in the fire service, particularly that. It was interesting for me. I taught a workshop on Monday. I think I taught the first data-focused workshop that's ever been at FDIC. I don't remember one, if there was one. So the attendance was good, right? I was impressed with how many folks showed up for that, and that's why I was kind of thinking, like when you and I first talked, there's a lot of talent in the fire service. I'm talking to Chief. We're talking about data and all this. And he starts mentioning running Python scripts and stuff, and I quickly knew I was outgunned. Yeah. Right. So I was like, man, this guy really knows what he's doing. And when you start looking around the fire service, that starts to be, that's how a lot of fire departments are getting by, is they have somebody in the that's in a uniform that just happens to be that person that has that skill and ability. And I think you're going to start to see that become more of a focus over the next 5-10 years in the fire service. A lot like fire dynamics was a big focus 10-15 years ago. Now you're going to start to see it to evolve in the data. So like, I'm really curious, Mike, tell us how you got into the geospatial world, because I know it was an operations thing through your old fire department. Like, tell us the story there.
Yeah, so a couple of career milestones for me came up. The majority of my career was operational. We got the task force and with the state hazmat team, and I was, I got in the fire service with great stuff. That's what a lot of us do. Run calls and put out fires. We had a uniform captain's position in our emergency management office. And that was really my first exposure to the power of technology and informing our responders, appropriately to help them deal with the mission. But I'll go into the EOC one day during a hurricane, East Coast, and big, pretty map on the wall, and you can like click on it and it'll tell you stuff. It's data enriched. And I look at our IT director and I said, "Hey, what is this?" And he goes, "Oh, that's our GIS." I said, "Well, when did we get this?" He goes, "I don't know, 30 years ago." I'm like, "Well, why didn't you tell us about it?" He goes, "Well, why didn't you ask about it?" And that's and those kind of conversations still are in fire departments today, particularly if the IT is not under the fire chief or within the fire department. Yeah, that's can be a difficult conversation to have sometimes. The second part, and what really got me in the position I'm in today, is we have a NASCAR facility back home that we say we host 120,000 customers twice a year. But many of you did deal with these large special events, which a lot of us do. I'm sitting in Indianapolis talking about racing. You know, it's a 5 or 6 day event, camping. You've set up a little city. You're operating outside your normal PSAP 911 process. And when I got promoted high enough to be in unified command, I walk in the command post and well run a bit. I'm not criticizing that, but look over and this young lady, dispatcher sitting in the corner, and she's got a yellow pad of paper and a handheld radio. I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I'm dispatching calls." And I'm like, we can't keep doing it. 120,000 people, you know, and you have 1 or 2 fatalities nearly every race, that kind of thing. And the workflow prior to actually engaging technology was, hey, I've got an abdominal pain somewhere. You key up the radio, you just broadcast it and see who steps up and takes the call, the walking team, the bike team, whatever. Well, abdominal pain, you get crickets, right? Nobody answers the radio. Cardiac arrest or an assault, everybody answers the radio, but you couldn't determine the closest appropriate resource. So we called ESRI, Disaster Response Program. They showed up for a couple of races and they helped us set up not only understanding where the incident was on the operational area, but tracking firefighters in the field in real time. So I knew where my bike team, my ALS carts, or my walking teams were, and I could dispatch them appropriately, not beg for somebody to respond to the call. So that really got me involved in geospatial specifically, and here we sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you mentioned the IT challenge. I was just on a phone call in my day job. I work with a data analytics company, Tech, and that's one of the great challenges we face a lot of times is fire and IT.
Yeah.
You know, like the IT department's over here and they are not necessarily aware of what's going on. And you have to build that relationship with the technology.
Well, and if the IT resource is not within your agency, they may not understand what your priorities are. If they're not operating in the fire department day to day, they don't understand what your challenges are, what you're facing, right? Get some coffee and donuts, go by the IT director's office, sit down for an hour, and let them understand what your priorities are. And sometimes that helps change their focus or helps them support you more.
How is it working with you? How do you guys manage your IT relationships?
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest issue, right? I think in marrying that, right, we kind of know some issues, IT world, a lot of good stuff, right? There's a lot of advancement technologies but it can be applied in so many different domains. It's having that domain knowledge. It's marrying the domain knowledge with the technology and knowing how you can utilize it with that. And that's kind of how I got started with being curious, right? And I think that's with a lot of things. There's probably a lot of stories. Is really curiosity and asking questions and well, how can I get that information? And you read what's available and well, how do I apply that? Right? I've been a computer nerd since high school, right? And coded and using MS-DOS, right? Yeah. Windows wasn't around, and but that was it, right? And so we don't have a central IT. We have very competent IT within the city, but you know, we say, hey, we want this, and it's just trying to communicate that back and forth, and it's not really a something we have immediately available with us. So what we had to do, so I became an analytics person. Right. And so those challenges came up. I had some knowledge, kind of reached out and pulled data, was able to do some coding. Some VBA code is where I started out with back in the day and moved to some Python and then eventually it's an odd thing to have as far as education of a chief officer, but I have a postgrad in artificial intelligence and machine learning. Right. Yeah, I know I get that look, but it's pretty relevant, right? And it helps me be curious and start putting those things together.
So that's in-house for you guys mostly.
Yes, it's in-house, but it's furthering along, right? And you know, as an operations chief, it takes me away from being an operations chief in the field, and so but it's important, right? We've got to know how we're doing system-wide. Right, Yeah, how our new policies are helping us, right? Are we improving our response times? Do we have resources? Uh, how do I take that? Because data is data, right? It's a so what until you make it information and able to convey that to somebody. And that's kind of what we're doing. All in house right now. As we're coming through here through FDIC, I'm talking to different people. A lot of trending going on. Business intelligence, yes, positions within your department is common thing. We hired somebody last week. That's exact. So it won't longer just be me; it'll be somebody else. And if you start making those decisions, data-driven decisions that are showing objectively where you're at, where you need to be, where those performance gaps are, it starts to show value and return on investment.
And Trevor, how is this set up? What kind of experience do you have with working with IT? Is it an external department or something inside the IFD, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we're a bit of a hybrid, right? As part of a fairly large entity, the enterprise. We have a separate organization or department agency, obviously ISA, our Information Services Agency, kind of oversees all of our technology for the entire enterprise. They're all of Indianapolis. But we're blessed at IFD to have Dale Rolfson as our battalion chief. He's our chief information officer and our chief technology officer, right? And he's someone that was captain with the city of Lawrence, version IFD. So in his current position, he's a battalion chief. He brings a wealth of knowledge both from the IT side and from the street. Right? Like he's been on the job. He's done it, but he's also stayed very active in the community, the tech community. He's very forward. He was involved with the IU, the Indiana First Responder Challenge that just went on at Muscatatuck. We're looking at 3D tracking of firefighters inside structure. So the point being that he's continued to put himself out there and make himself aware of what the new developments in technology are. We can apply those to IFD. So again, we're blessed to have him. For us internally, they've always been very understaffed, right? So having a large organization with 45 different work sites, 36 work sites at times, that he has to manage both the hardware and the software side of it. It gets help through ISA, and there's things that we have to go through the agency for. But when it came time to begin our accreditation process, really kind of we had some processes in place occasionally to run reports to look at response times, but it was really more about run police incidents being closed. And that was really the only bandwidth that we could take on. So in the planning division, we had to stand that up for ourselves as we needed that data, obviously, to move forward through the accreditation process and to provide the highest quality of service we could for the community. So I'll offer that. I'd say we're somewhere in between, where when we started out, we went to Paul Rotensberg's class and learned how to do 90th percentiles and take that CAD data in and scrub it and process it. The gentleman that's currently our accreditation manager, when he came in, in fairness, he was valedictorian of his class, but he'll tell you that he was not a proficient typer when he came in. So he would spend portions of his day learning how to type. He now runs and processes all of our data by hand with the use of Excel. And you can go to him and say, I need this report for this area, this type of run. Tell me about how have our response times changed from first arriving to the ERF when this change occurred. And give him about 45 minutes to an hour. And without any other analytic tool, he's able to produce that report. So point is I'm in awe of your degree in pursuing that knowledge base. If you're that base firefighter that's interested in getting into this space, like you don't be intimidated. Like you can jump in, and that's a great purchase point. There are people you can get involved with that can help you work through those first steps. And then down the road, I think this is where we're headed. Like we need somebody like our department to take us to the next step. The other thing I would add though is having the opportunity to work on different peer teams through the accreditation process and traveling the country. It really seems like the best situation is when we have this with Dale, when the IT folks are, they listen, they want to hear what the problem is that you're having. They go out and find 2 or 3 different solutions and then bring that back to you and let you know what the pros and cons are of each and what they can and can't do to support you. And then let the fire department make that decision. I see it go ways as I travel around where sometimes the IT folks are very rigid that they have a solution. This is going to be the solution that rarely works out. Sometimes the firefighters are very rigid that we have a solution that we want, and the IT tries to tell them it's not going to work. But they still ahead and move forward with it. And IT's like, I told you. So that communication, bilateral communication, is always a key to success, I think, in this
That's
space.
a key part, man. One of my little sayings I used to have before I retired was particularly related to technology. I was like, don't tell me no, tell me how. right? We'll decide whether or not to move forward or not. But instead of just, no, you can't do that. Well, I know I can. I've already done a little bit of looking around. So tell me what the solutions are and what the practicality might be, and what I need to do with the budget process. But just a flat doesn't
What are my
sell
options?
well.
Yeah,
What are my options, right? So Mike, what's it? So you've taken. He's probably going to get the gold star, the most difficult class as far as career development goes. For I'm thinking of firefighters who are walking the halls out here at FDIC, and this is going to be a new lane opening up for the next generation of firefighters. And it would be an excellent, if it was me, it sounds like if I was looking to be that firefighter that wants to get promoted to lieutenant, or that lieutenant that wants to make captain, or move up the food chain, you're typically going to have to compete in some sort of process, right? There's going to be a written exam, there's going to be an assessment center probably of some sort, some interviews. What classes would you recommend to folks that to help them get prepared in this lane of data and technology? Where should they go? Like, what would be the first step someone that might be interested in that? What might they take? Mike, where would you begin?
Several options there, obviously. I mean, we provide a great deal of training that firefighters can access from the fire station.
Right.
Heard a great story, Chief, at your consortium meeting yesterday about providing access to remote and online training to firefighters while they're on duty, and then some kind of acknowledgement, reward, whatever you call it, career development, when they actually get a certificate or course completion, even outside of a normal, say, brick and mortar college. But certainly we're seeing additional degrees in different types and very specific technology deployments related to public safety. So you'll see, master's program around wide area search and response to disasters with the use of technology. And that's not the way they're going to title it, I assure you, but that's the gist of it, is to be able to do that. And, certainly keep an eye on the National Fire Academy and the course development that's occurring there. You'll see more and more technology embedded in existing classes, but also new courses being developed that will have specific technology focus. And I think going back to the chief's description about how they have IT either within the agency or not, we're seeing more and more of that form of CTO. A chief's position for CTO is awesome. I think that's a trend. I hope that's a trend. And we're seeing that being codified in a number of areas, but NFPA's new qualification standard, NFPA 1022, if you want to see a map to be a specific technologist type for your fire agency, look at that standard. It's about to be published formally, but it's in draft now. You can look at it. But it's got specific professional qualifications for different types of analysis, whether you're doing geospatial or big data or whatever it might be. So take a look at that too, and add involved in that development of that core, that NFPA standard as well. So a lot of
right. And I was excited to see that was in development and following it. And I did reference some drafts of 1022 and really specifically mention that in justifications for the business intelligence position. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. That's really important.
Yeah, and if you're a fire chief trying to recruit and or hire these type of personnel, take a look at that standard. I mean, it's literally a roadmap for success for data analysis within a fire agency.
Yeah, it having the ability to look at, they have data analysts, they have GIS analysts, and business analysts broken out into the 3 chapters. So no matter what lane you might be in, there's at least a great starting place in that document. And it was written by the technical committee for that standard was really good. I mean, there's a whole bunch of talent on that thing. Some of the the best in the business that we know of right now were there, and they worked really hard. I was really surprised to see how much it was a ton of work.
I'll give a shout out to Preet Bassi of CPSC as the chair of that committee. I was honored and humbled even to be a part of it. But it was great. It was a great body of work to be involved with.
There's step one is go get that document and check it out. Figure out what the even starting like in the class I did today, we just talked about common terminology. Like, what the heck is an API? When I first started paying attention to technology, I'm over here. I'm in a meeting and I'm Googling stuff, to try to learn these things. So it's a great place to start for information.
Yeah, and that's kind of it, right? And we talked about my degree, right? And I didn't just jump into that, right?
You didn't walk into the wrong room.
No, yeah. So you start off with basics, and I think that's really where we need to start off, and bringing it into a curriculum of training our firefighters. Even maybe even starting with our company officer and their development and understanding those basic terminology, some basic statistics, which is, I know it's kind of become a scary word, but what is, the difference between average and mean, or a mean, which is the same thing as average, or the median value, and how that can be different, right? And why it's different. And you get different measures when you're doing an average response time versus 90th percentile response time. I'm sure we did accreditation. That was probably a big thing to hump to get over, right? When you're going to a council and explain what's your average response time. I mean, it's this, but 80% of the time, it's this. And so learning those really kind of basics of just some of the things we look at, how to calculate, your turnout time, how to calculate your response time and your total and what those mean, right? And then start from there. And then you can get curious from there on, if it's somebody that's coming up through the ranks and kind of worry about within your territory. And as you're moving forward, look at the next one, you want to look past the apron of your organization and seeing how that data affects throughout. And you can't move on through your business without knowing the data of your business, and you're not going to be successful with that without that. Yeah. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. How do you tell your story? Right.
Yeah.
You have to do it with verified data. You have to do it with, it can't be, we have to move away from this gut feeling and being able to tell the story with that data that you're describing, Chief. That helps us justify, hey, I need a rescue company. I need a new fire station. I need 10 more medics per shift. That's the kind of stories you need to be able to tell with that verified data, the analysis you're speaking about.
And it's processed and relevant, and you're right, tell the story. It's not just, hey, I need a new fire station, or I need 2 more ambulances, right? Running out of ambulances, we need more. Well, how many more do you need? When are you running out of them, right? And show me the data. I mean, how often, what day, those types of things.
What are you saying as far as educational opportunities? What would you steer people towards?
So not to be too much of a Center for Public Safety Excellence shill, okay, but there's a reason why they're the best at what they do. And it kind of ties in what Chief was saying. I think that the quality improvement for fire services is an excellent class for a young firefighter to take. And we don't see a ton of them, right? We see a lot of folks that have moved into the role as their accreditation manager and we'll learn how to do accreditation. But the reality is, as a firefighter, it would have been very difficult to go through that because it does force you to look outside of just your station, look outside of just the remit of being a firefighter and to think about the fire service in your department. It's going to give you an introduction, be it just 3 days, on how to perform a community risk assessment. What are the things that should matter as we're trying to determine where we're putting our resources in the tactical rescue teams that are going to stand up. It's going to walk you through the basics of how to create a strategic plan, what's important, why is it important, who are the stakeholders that are actually involved, because it's easy to kind of just get caught up in the day-to-day of me and my crew or the firefighters as thinking through. No admin has a say in that. The authority having jurisdiction has a say in that. Our customers have a say in that. Some of those customers own businesses, some of them are just residents, some of them are commuting through and trying to think through all the needs and different responsibilities that we have to ensure the safety of those individuals. If anything, if you go through that course, and it will kind of provide a direction as to what do I want to learn more about, and then you can jump off from there and go learn. But when it comes time to go through that promotion process, it's going to give you a leg up because you're going to be used to thinking of things on a more global level. I just finished a promotion process with IFD, and one of the things that really helped me was this experience, right, of having to think through how do I answer this core competency or this industry best practice from a variety of different perspectives. And sitting as a assessor for for other departments, what see people that are the most successful are those that can come in, answer the question from their own perspective, but then think about each one of the characters that are in this live scenario. And that's where people get so hung up that, I've got a great answer, but it's very, very narrow. So if I want to separate myself from the competition, I need to be able to address it from multiple different angles. And it's not about gaming the system to get promoted. The reality is the reason why that question is that question and it's structured in the way that it's structured is because when you're sitting in that role, that's what you're going to have to do to be successful long term. Right? So something that is often overlooked that would be a valuable resource maybe to help help learn how to do that. If you are familiar with massive open online courses, so the MOOCs are available through edX, they're available through Coursera. To find some leadership courses, to find some business management courses. You can take those for free if you don't need the certificate. If you're just trying to get the knowledge, you can go through that coursework and then learn how to think through as a manager, right? And then that's going to make that process of answering those questions at the assessment center that much easier, and obviously benefit you when you find yourself in that role as well.
Glad you mentioned that. I use that quite a bit, and that's how I get a little bit of this, a little bit of that on those types of platforms that you described, and that's really a part of it.
That the CPSE University is a very, very useful tool. I don't know how many years ago, it was a long time ago, when our department first was considering the accreditation process. I went and took those classes, right? So I'm showing up, even though we ended up being like, the economy crashed in 08 or whatever it was, and everything kind of went sideways. But those were some of the better classes that I had found that I could take. And one of the themes from the conference, if you've been following along online with some of the keynotes and stuff, Chief Rhodes is talking about starting a revolution, and to do that, you have to put some skin in the game. Like, maybe your department doesn't want to send you to the CPSC learning experiences, or they don't want to send you to whatever opportunity it might be identified that could be helpful. Do it anyway. Find a way to do it, whether it be you have to pay for it yourself or maybe find some other way to attend or look for a scholarship or something. But you want to get in that room to get that training, because that's really what's going to make a lot of difference. And I think I can kind of tell, like, your fire chiefs have bosses, and their bosses go to conferences too. And they go to their conference, and they have somebody get up and give a class on what fire departments should be doing.
Yeah.
And they are not in the fire department. They're not, affiliated with the fire service necessarily. I've looked some of these people up, because I talk to a lot of fire chiefs all the time, and I can almost tell when they've had a conference, like, because all of a sudden this theme emerges out of nowhere that everybody's talking about this thing, and I'm like, where the heck did this thing come from?
What is the NACO list of questions you should ask your fire chiefs? Right. Perfect example of that. That's where your city managers are going. That's the kind of information they're getting.
So, where do they get their information? If they're speaking in the terms of data and technology, they're going to be talking about performance metrics. You're going to have to learn how to do that. And the sooner you start down that road as a young fire officer, the more competitive you're going to be. So while your buddies might be outside, and I'm all about going out, throwing some ladders and doing some work. I'm not taking anything away from that. But to make yourself stand out from the crowd, you can start speaking the language that the chiefs are already having trouble with, and that makes you a tremendous asset. So, and I think with the 1022 standard coming out, and you're going to start to see career paths appear in fire departments, like some of you already have. And I know they're being stuck in admin.
Yeah, and I think that's the future, though. Yeah. I don't think the future is being stuck in admin, but I think that there's some stigma about accreditation and those as a system-wide process. That's where data analysis lives, right? But that shouldn't be true. It should be, when you talk about ownership and control of your career, it doesn't have to be when you get the ivory tower or when you get in the admin, so when you start using those skills. You can use those skills as a company officer for accountability and confidence that your crews are performing. Right? It shouldn't be, and maybe that's our job as administrators, to make sure that provide our company officers and our firefighters a platform that they can go be curious, ask those questions, and have the skill set to ensure that they're improving, that their crews are improving. We put out a new fireground operations policy in Christie, and the intent is to get certain tactical objectives completed. Ensuring that we're getting primary search completed sooner. When are we getting primary search completed? When are we getting our supply done? How soon are we doing that? And you need to have a measure for that, so that company officer should be able to go in there and see, where were we at on our average or 90 percentile time to initiating primary search on a structure fire. Where are we now? And so that really speaks to accountability for your crew and it could measure on how successful a program is put out. And those are things that company officers can discuss with their crews. They can identify hazards in the area, what the call volume is in the area, and really target things within their own district and make a difference there, rather than just system-wide.
Data beyond the air brake, man. I've joked in classes a lot of times that if you were to look at our data sets we measure now, you might think we were a drag racing team or something.
Yeah,
Because what we focus on is this, the alert speed to get someplace and stop.
Yeah.
So if we stop at the air brake, that's it. Clock stops. So we're just getting started, man. We're just starting to do work. So there's so much opportunity there. I had Phoenix Fire on the show a couple of episodes ago, and they were doing some really cool work where they brought everybody through the thing that Phoenix can do so big.
Yeah.
When they take a data sample, they get a pretty big data sample. A lot. I think it was like 900 people went through this evolution or something crazy. And they were looking at things like forcing the door. How long did it take to get to a certain spot and force the door? How long did it take to get to the roof? And they captured these, benchmarks just using some real basic technology, nothing fancy. They were just using Microsoft tools they already had. And what they found was there was a spread. I'm preaching to the choir here. They got a bell curve of data that there were companies that performed really well at these tasks, and there were some companies that weren't so great at these tasks, and then everybody in the middle. And while a lot of times people focus on averages, what they were more concerned with was trying to take what can we learn from the really proficient companies that we can share with the not so proficient companies, and they use the term close the spread.
Yeah.
So they're trying to bring in that bell curve to be tighter, so that they can show that they can demonstrate they've improved their tactics. And they actually did. They did that. They went in. They put force military props out at the stations that they knew who needed them. So they delivered those props to the stations that were appropriate.
Yeah.
Gave them extra opportunities and training to work on those skills. And then the key thing that often is forgotten is to run people back through the evolution again and measure it again and see what improvements were made. And it's a really good episode. If you haven't watched that before, go back and look in the archives here. And it's a good episode to watch because it's very tactical in nature and using data to improve operational performance.
Yeah, that's the great thing about FDIC, right? I've learned a lot, right? And I actually got to speak to him, right? Training guy from Phoenix this week, and that really spurred so much curiosity. We can do. That's a great idea, right? And I think 10,000 data points they caught, and
that's great.
It was amazing. I was like, that is a great idea. And how can we bring that home? And how do you put that operationally? How is that applying to the actual background calls?
So y'all doing anything in that, like beyond the air brake stuff?
We really struggle with it. We struggle with a means to catch those data points. And one of the things internally that we would really like to be able to track and follow would be what was the situation found with what was left, right? So it's one thing to say, well, we had $1 million loss in the structure, but if we showed up and it was 80% involved when we showed up, is that $1 million loss reflective of our firefighting? And there's a whole conversation we had about looking at taking a systemic approach, like, well, why was the fire 80% involved before we even got there, right? Is it an issue with inspections or education with the public, education with the telecommunicator, whatever? But excuse me, we've struggled to find a way to easily capture that data, or at least consistently capture it. But as you were speaking through, Chief, one of the things that popped up when we went through our strategic planning process, we tried to bring in folks from every level, right? So captains, lieutenants, and battalion chiefs who were very skeptical of our data. Right? They felt like we're getting there on time, and we've been keeping the times ourselves, and it seemed a little off. And it led to a conversation that I think both sides were broken in terms of the data is not necessarily the end-all be-all. It's just the beacon that should draw your attention to a possible issue. So, like in your case, and this is a perfect Phoenix's example is a perfect example of that, where we recognized we had this issue with getting door pops, and then we went and looked at the data. But then that told us which companies should we look at to find out who's doing things well, and where do we really need to apply those lessons, right? For us, from a broader standpoint, it was about, okay, the data can only tell us what's being captured in data. Not to overstate the obvious, but if there's no way to capture this metric, then planning's never going to see it. But if there's a real issue, it's going to turn up somewhere in the data. And then that conversation needs to be, hey, we've identified what looks like to be a problem. Maybe or maybe not, you share what you think the problem is. You go to the people involved and say, what's going on? Like, what's working, what's not working, almost sight unseen, and let them provide that feedback. We had issues where we identified high problem areas for arson fires in our city. And we went out and met with the folks in the community to like, what's going on out here? And they talked about how they had certain areas that had just tons of trash that had been cleaned up. And we're talking about like mountains of trash in alleyways. Well, arsonists would get behind that using it as cover to get ready, set the fires that they want to set, and then get out. So point being that we went in there knowing that there was a problem, but we didn't come in and try to fix a problem until we talked to the people that were involved in it. We were able to partner with DPW and get that waste removed, and shockingly, the arson numbers went way down. So I'm a little bit off topic here, but that's been the biggest lesson that we've learned as far as the data is that beacon, that alert to go look at something, but it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. You have to then, that's just should draw your attention to this area, and then meet with the stakeholders involved and take a look to try to figure out what are the prescriptions that we need to apply to maybe solve this issue. And then to your point, double back and make sure that it worked. That's something that we've struggled with, where we've identified a problem and built a great solution for the problem to implement it, and just assume that it worked. Instead of going back and saying, well, if it didn't work, why not? Did we execute the plan poorly, or was it just a poor plan, and how do we regroup? If it did work, we need to move the resources off of that program to the next issue, and not just continue to do the same thing over and over again because it was successful one time.
Mike, what are you seeing out there? I know you talk to a lot of fire chiefs, just in your normal course of the day. What are you seeing? Are you seeing anything that's really interesting, or people that are taking data beyond air brake stuff and doing interesting things with it? I know USAR and all sorts of things.
Yeah, that I was going to mention, that reminds me of your presentation on Find Me a Few Seconds.
Yeah.
After you set the brake. And that's what this data does, right? Where can I build some efficiencies in the operations based on good data collection? We know we don't collect the right data all the time. We know we're not analyzing the correct data. We're not visualizing it appropriately. We talk all the time, and the fire service will say, hey, fires are down, fires are down. Okay, absolutely. Per capita, it's not down. Fire fatalities and single family dwellings. Are we looking at the right data and collecting the right data? And that's a struggle sometimes to get the right data there. But with effort, you can do that. I think one thing we'll see change is with the modernization of INFRS into the nearest program, the National Emergency Response Information System, being developed by USFA currently. There's a lot of input. I mean, I know the panel members here have had some input on what's going to be in that. There is a public comment capability. I'm pretty sure it's still open. I'm positive. But if you have issues or ideas or comments that can help with this exact issue, what kind of data do we need to understand our operations? Where are our gaps in service? How do we tell them? Make that comment, right? Engage in the development of these technologies. And then even beyond that, as administrators, as officers, we have to understand that the people we're hiring have certain expectations around technology, right? And if you're coming into the fire service, you have to expect to be able to engage in these technologies as well. So the USAR, FEMA SARCOP, Search and Rescue Common Operating Picture, is a perfect example. We're seeing that being used at a local and regional level over and over and over again. You can go to the NAPSG sandbox that's part of that program and see, nearly several cities in every state. You'll see symbology where they're doing these exercises. So you had an exercise just a couple of weeks ago, somewhere around the eclipse, I believe it was, but you've got symbology up on that national map where you had personnel in the field. We're tracking in real time. I can understand where they've done their work, where they haven't done their work. I can identify risks and prevent them from getting into areas they can't or shouldn't get into, I should say. I mean, a great example of SARCOP to me was the flooding in Kentucky a couple of years ago, where they had a 3D model, topography, digital twin, with near real-time satellite-driven remote sensing flood model. So it was relatively accurate. And as a task force leader or unified commander, I can look at this app and I can see, hey, these structures are 60 feet underwater down in these hollows, as they would say in Kentucky, right? So we're not doing dive operations during a wide area search. So I'm not even going to put people in that area that's unsafe and unnecessary. I'm going to have a safer, more efficient deployment of resources based on the appropriate use of technology and collecting the right data.
Mike mentioned the Find Me a Few Seconds. That's one of the things I'm pretty passionate about when we are talking about the reasons for this data analysis. That's what got me into it, kind of, was coming out of the lessons learned from FSRI, seeing the search and rescue studies, where the survivable spaces are, and the timeframes to go with that. we're talking seconds. We're like 15 seconds. It doesn't sound like much sitting here, but when you're in a structure fire about to die, that's a lifetime. 15 seconds could the difference of me. How fast can I get across the front yard? Like if you can give me a couple steps across the front yard, I'll take it. Now, how can I do that? I can't drive there any faster. So I either have to use community risk reduction efforts to avoid the problem in the first place, or hopefully have some public education where maybe they know to close the door and do some compartmentation. That would help them out. The only other thing I can do is try to optimize how I'm deployed so that I can pick up 15 seconds. And these are things that are possible today where we can optimize, where fire stations are, where units are, even in real time. So that's really what the is to try to get a firefighter on the front porch just a little bit faster, man. Whatever way we can do that. And we've done everything already and we can do. Now we're down to the science of leveraging operations research and some of the more complicated things like we do have the capabilities to do and get firefighters on the porch a little faster. That's really what this whole thing is about.
And it's analyzing the whole system, right? I mean, even down to where you place your fire station and using technology and science and crucial stuff and it's huge. And we've recently done that this year, right? We're able to, draw and map what we call travel isochrones, right? That will show graphically how far a fire truck can travel within 4 5 minutes, 6 minutes from this proposed location versus this other location that's not on Artiller Road and that's this 6 blocks up this way that's in a city park that might be city owned land already that would be beneficial today, but you can show graphically on how small that response coverage is now at 4 and 5 and 6 minutes. And it makes sense to decision makers. I get much larger response time and much larger value out of this plot of land to build a new fire station on than this, which is a simple technology. That right there alone could save you 15.
You only get to do it once.
Right, exactly. It's a huge 50, sometimes 60 year investment, right? And so you want to make sure you're getting the right location and using those points.
Exactly went through that. So we were relocating one of our busiest stations on the east side of town. There was they asked planning, draw us a box, where the station need to be at, and they found a spot inside the box. But it was located buried back in the neighborhood, and it made sense from a land procurement standpoint because the school had a ton of land. We could build a great firehouse there. They could have drive-through bays. Everything makes sense. Except for it was going to take us forever to get out to one of the main roads. So then that 4-minute circle just shrank in. So, I mean, I think that a lot of folks are looking at that. But, that's the example that, to your point, that would have been the easy way and it would have been justifiable because it was in that box that we had identified. But the reality was that we were going to be hamstrung for the next 50 years until the station was rebuilt.
And something to consider, too, Chief, of the analysis you're speaking of is, to my experience, to fund – particularly if you're doing some kind of bond funding or something like that, to fund and staff and build a fire station is a 5-year cycle, right? So what do those conditions look like 5 years out? What's the population impact going to be? What's my urban planning and the 15, 20, or 25-year strategic plan for expansion within your locality look like? And that kind of analysis you can do today. I mean, we can look 5, 10 years out and understand what the population increase impacts may be on that fire station location. So excellent example, Chief.
Absolutely. Even with staffing, that's one of the things I think young officers learn the hard way most of the time is how long it takes for things to occur in the budget cycle. Right. So staffing, I came up with a combination system. It was back in the 80s and 90s. It was mostly volunteer firefighters with some paid administration. And then it started to transition into pretty much a career fire department at this point, largely career. And, by the time, if you waited for, in our case, the volunteer fire company to actually ask for assistance, it was already a crisis. The staffing crisis already existed. That's what drove them to go, okay, uncle, I need some help now. And then, of course, we found out the hard way. It's going to take us, we got to catch it in the next budget cycle. So we've got to go brief everybody. The board members educated on the need. We got to demonstrate the need with some sort of data because I don't care where you are, that's gonna be a question. And then what, maybe 2-3 years before you, because then I got to go recruit them, I got to train them, I got to get them in PPE, get them actually to show up at a firehouse. You're talking 3 years, man.
Easy.
So from a budget standpoint, you've got to use some sort of predictive analytic process to be able to have some idea so that the resources are showing up at the time, and then you throw a fire station in there 5-7 years, and apparatus didn't used to be such a problem, but now it is.
Oh yeah.
To where you're waiting years to get an apparatus. Somebody's got to be looking at it, and trying to figure out how to measure with whatever tools you have, and get some kind of projection downrange of what needs to happen.
And I think that's going to be the benefit of, at least the intended benefit of Nearest.
Yes.
I think that's going to be huge, right? And so I had the privilege and opportunity to talk with Dr. Moore yesterday, and I asked her those questions. You talked about that now all these departments are sending in hundreds of thousands, millions of rows of data into there, and bringing in weather data and bringing in geospatial data. And the first thing that pops in my head is machine learning and predictive analytics, and I think that's the future. I think what that's going to do as well, because now there's analytics platforms for everybody, right? Even smaller departments, and I think that's going to be a good leap forward when that's said and done. And I think the biggest impact is going to be on the smaller departments, right? Because their data that they have, there's a thing called statistical significance, right? That Corpus last year, I'll run a fiscal year of data for me is over 111,000 rows of responses, and so I can get a good normal distribution with that. My average are pretty close, and so I have some statistical significance when I run my data. A smaller department may not be able to have that if they only have 50 to 100 runs that year. And they're going to have wider variations and different things, but I think Nearest may help them do that in a regional aspect, or run those types of things, or at least kind of give them some comparisons to get more relevant data that way. I think that's a good future for at least our smaller departments that are going up. Obviously for the big ones, but I think it's going to help our smaller come out and get some good data.
And hopefully, UHU is always a great discussion to understand how to define it, measure it, and then what do you do with it? Like, I know Henrico, where you came from, Mike, and they've done some really interesting things, but I hadn't seen anybody do where they had a pretty much a commitment from local government that at certain thresholds of UHU they would take an action. So that would start a budget conversation when you hit 0.18 or whatever, So I'll take that as like the high standard of how things should hopefully work, But then I'm sure wish that was the process we could have leveraged for small volunteer companies, Instead of, we can start to look at a UHU, measurement of some sort to indicate when they should be asking for assistance, or, considering some other staffing model or things like that.
So what was the number that you
So, and I might be off by a few percentage points here and there, but the basic workflow was, when I had an engine company, it was a very basic UHU analysis too. It wasn't like the true utility models, like how much are you out of service on calls? That's what we didn't count training hours or anything like that. So when an engine company got, I think it was 10% UHU, just a call commitment, we went to talk to the board. Hey, it's coming. So around 12 or 14%, it was in the budget cycle. So the goal was, before it got to 18 or before it got to 20%, I'll say, we had an engine company in place. But again, that was variable because hiring practices, getting apparatus delivered.
Yeah.
A truck was a little bit less than that, and an ambulance was much higher than that. So ambulance, was like, because we were, full service ALS transport. So I believe it was like 20% we started talking about the medic, before 30% we wanted to have another medic service. So I might be off 30%.
That's pretty close.
You're right. You're pretty close. For ambulance, it's about 0.3 to 0.4, or 0.3, 30% of the time. 5, 3. That's what I use in ours. We started really using UHU the last 2 years, and engine companies are absolutely right. So we're using point, not as in, like, if we go this way, we have to, but we're using it to show what is busy versus call volume versus, time on call, right? When they're available. And correct me wrong, and this is the way I've looked at it, right? I did engine companies from 0.05 to 0.10. That's 5% to 10%, right? And we're talking about performance and response time at 90th percentile. how do you meet your 90th percentile when you're only available 88% of the time? Right. If you're at a 0.2 in your company.
So we try to triangulate all three of those, right? I'm talking about utilization and reliability. So are you first arriving in your first due area? Right? That's what percentage time is. And then what's your 90th percentile when it is an in-district unit that's first arriving versus when it's not? So what's the impact, right? We have an area in our outskirts where they're only in 16% of the time in their own district because their district is so massive and so sparsely populated. But the impact of them when they're not in, when it's not this engine that's first there, it's actually faster than somebody else gets there. So it's just a whole other conversation. But I do think it's interesting, and using those same conversations right now to talk about relocating apparatus and saving additional apparatus. We have our second busiest station area is a single company home. So they're having 16,000 incidents in their area a year, and it's just one engine. And obviously, they're not getting all those because they're on calls. There's, so the concurrent calls force now other resources from their areas into Engine 23's area, which is impacting their reliability and our response times, right? So what it's been, we're finally at the point now where we can tell that story with the data to the mayor, to the union, and we stand up and say, yes, we need a ladder at this station. We need a squad on this battalion because it's not only affecting our first due times, but if you want to look at our ERFs across anything that's moderate risk or higher, whether that be fire, medical, technical rescue, or hazmat, they're 20% higher than our benchmark. And that's only happening in this one battalion, and we can now walk back and show you why. The call is too much, the utilization is too high, causing reliability to go down, which is dreadfully impacting our time to scene. So where I'd love to see this discussion, I read Dean Munsey's paper. He pointed to
what I referred to.
13.4, I think, is where he kind of came to, somewhere around there, right? It's being a threshold. And again, that's going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, what your asking your firefighters are. But taking it a step further and thinking from a firefighter health perspective, thinking about turnover perspective, like we struggle to capture the time that it takes for, okay, the incident's over, I'm back in the apparatus and I'm heading back to the station. Does the UU clock stop when it's in service? Because in our methodology, it does. We're just using CAD data to say they're on a run, off a run, right? But the reality is that firefighter doesn't have that time necessarily to spend how he or she wants. And then does it matter that they spent 44% of their actual in-service time or responding time on working residence fires or alarm runs or difficulty breathing? Like, how do you balance out, like, not every run is equal. So that percentage of the time that they're spending on, what's the mental and physical impact on the firefighter? So in other words, you could be on a ladder that has a 6% utilization, but on 90% of those runs, you're on working residence fires. You're working a lot harder than somebody whose utilization may be 16.5%, but they're really just assisting the medic on 80% of their runs, right? And then is there a direct correlation between turnover? In our station, our department is very easy. We have postings every 6 weeks, so we have to move around. Shockingly, our busiest apparatus sometimes have vacancies that sit for months and months and months, right? And then more hitting the bottom line, like, is that leading to time off? Are we seeing more injuries at certain stations, and can you directly tie it just to UU, or is it tied to the type of runs that these folks are going on? So that's kind of what we're hoping to take the discussion in the next few years, but we're struggling to capture some of those other data points that we need to really tell a whole story.
You bring up a good point, kind of as we get ready to kind of wrap up this particular episode. What do you guys think are the most challenging data-related issues that we should be thinking about as a fire service? Like, what do you see on the horizon that's really a pitch point for us that we should be talking about?
No, for me, garbage in, garbage out.
So collection.
Right, it's collection. And I think that kind of goes into how the company officers can use data skills, improve themselves, sharing some of those things like our UHU trending from year to year, sharing some of the findings that we're using to justify to council or to our fire chief or whoever it is, sharing that with crews and explaining how this was calculated and why this is important when they're filling out that fire report. They have an understanding of what that means and how that affects their own territory, their own resources, and as they're inputting things in. So, getting accurate information is the biggest challenge that I see right now.
Okay.
So I have to parrot Chief Urban. I mean, like that is the bottom line. None of this other stuff matters if the data that we have is inaccurate. And when you talk to Dr. Lori, that's one of the main points. Is that yes, we have this inverse data, but it's more or less useless. Right? It's not. Do we have a cooking fire epidemic in the country? I don't know. If you look at inverse, yes.
And they coded it all because they don't have to do the structured reports. Yeah.
But when you go to, and this is not knock on the NFA, because I love NFA, but like when we went for our community risk reduction, there was a significant portion of those 2 weeks that was spent on build a program for cooking fires, right? Because that's what the data said. But again, was it accurate? I don't know. Yeah, just trying to capture more of those data points that will allow us to accurately assess, are we effective on scene? But then, and I think we're making strides towards that, but again, looking at it holistically. So if we're seeing loss, continue to plateau, if we're not seeing a difference in the number of lives that we're saving, all right, or at least we're seeing a plateau of the number of lives that we're losing, like really being aggressive and working through that call chain to figure out, why is that the case? Is it a tactics issue? Is it something before the fire even starts? Is it just an education? And that's where we should be putting our money. Is it code enforcement? I don't know, but like figuring out what are the data points that will allow us to identify where the breakdown is, and then be able to tell our story so that we can get support internally, because that's a huge piece of it, but then get the support of the folks that have control the purse strings.
Like
And that was 100% where I was going.
Yeah.
Are we collecting the right data? Are we analyzing it appropriately? And are we visualizing it and sharing it, telling that story appropriately? Every firefighter I talk to, 75% EMS. Yeah, 75% EMS. But are you looking at what you commit to an average structure fund? Or give me a multifamily second alarm that you have companies out for 4 to 6 hours, 30 or 40 firefighters. That's a significant impact to your operations, a significant impact to what you need to support your community. And it's not just 5 or 6 people running the abdominal pain and clear it up, right? So how are we looking at the data? What data are we collecting? It starts there. And we're seeing improvement currently, and I hope we continue to see that engagement with tech data.
I see kind of 2 things I'll add to that kind of looking would be we were kind of poking around firefighter fatigue a little bit there, and I think that's something we're gonna have to figure something out, because we've got to be able to address the scheduling issues and some of these things we've not been able to solve yet. We know there are problems. And then another thing I hear quite often is the discussion of, we don't know that we're going to get a lot more resources than we historically have done. So the only other option we have is to leverage some of this data and technology to try to get some of these calls off the plate. To use some community risk reduction efforts, mobile integrated health or something, to try to pull these non-emergency calls off our plate so that we have more time to focus on the more critical things. And, it's a lot of work to do out there for us as we go forward. So I think I appreciate you guys taking the time to come out. This is a really interesting discussion for me. I mean, listen to everybody's perspective. We've got such talent hanging around here, particularly at FDIC, and I was lucky enough to grab 3 of the smartest guys, walking out here in the hall. So thank you for taking the time to come in and spend some time with us. And I want to also thank Firehouse Subs for all their support. And again, if you were interested in looking at the ownership of a restaurant, you can firehousesubsfranchising.com is the place you can go to look for that. And be sure to check for the fire service data and tech talk on fire engineering. We'll air every month. I think with the first Saturday now is our schedule. Did you catch the next show? We're actually working on that'll be out very soon. So we're live from FDIC. Be sure to come back to the socials and check here often. You'll be able to see additional shows, just additional content. And some of the main sessions and some of that content is starting to air. You can go back and watch some of the great presentations we saw from Jason Hubbleman this morning. Was fantastic. So it's been a great conference here in Indianapolis. So I hope you haven't started making plans to be here next year. You might want to get on it now. Get your reservations and all that stuff straight. Be ready to go. So we're live from FDIC. I'm Eddie Buchanan with the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk. Everybody be safe. We'll see you next time.